Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're back with another classic movie that we're revisiting, or for me, watching for the first time.
Yeah, and this is exciting because this is the first podcast I think you've never seen the movie that we've reviewed prior to actually mentioning this, and I have from this classics kind of thing. And that movie is, of course, one of my favorites. One of the best, in my opinion, B movies of all time, The Crow. It was done in 1994, famously known as Brandon Lee's last movie, where he was killed on set by accident.
I watched the trailer, and it's like in his final tragic performance. I'm like, oh God, like you just can't go into it without thinking about that.
You can't go into it without thinking about that. And then the worst part about it too is like he never really had like a giant movie career. This was like his first like stepping stone into the big league.
Well, no, this was his fifth film.
Yeah, it was his fifth film. It was like one of the bigger.
But people didn't like him in other things.
Yes,
he was in big for the time big things. Like it's not stuff that like we're like, oh, he was in Die Hard. It's more like he was in things that weren't considered like, oh, whatever, that's whatever.
Yeah.
They were like genuine attempts at like box office success movies. This was the first one, I guess, that did really well because I think it's the same year as Pulp Fiction, and it definitely outgrossed Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Which is fun. I don't know if the death thing had a big aspect of that, or legitimately like his launch, his career was starting to launch off, and that was.
I would imagine that had something to do with it, but like
I'm pretty sure it did.
When you again, I always say like that helps like first weekend numbers, but for the success that it had, I mean. All things are relative, right? But like the success had meant that people went back to watch it. It's not just that it did like good in the first weekend, then everyone was like, "Oh, this is shit."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I feel like, and when I look at it, it's got a better rating than Batman '89. It's got Ebert loved it. Roger Ebert loved it. I don't know if he loved it, or if they just like very strategically took a very positive thing he said in his review and put it in the trailer. But like it's not like people are like, oh, this is shit.
Right. Not many people say this is shit. Everyone says the sequels are shit because they are.
But I think people at the time liked it. It's not like this wasn't like a cult classic, like it found its audience. It's like no, people liked it.
People did like this, and one of the biggest things about this, and this is something I never actually grasped onto, but like I watched this with Stacy, and she was saying like this is like the '90s alt scene in one movie, and I'm like, yeah, 100% this is, and it's just so cool because it's fun to see like this movie inspire my musical tastes too, and because
that's all I could think about when I was watching it. I was like, this is like Ben's movie.
That's exactly it. Like the soundtrack was like, it got me into so many bands, and it was awesome. So good, for sure.
I mean, I guess we should just leave the whole he died for its own segment. Let's try and just talk about the movie on its own.
So
I am fascinated. Like, just up top, I'll say it here. It's not our podcast, but there's a podcast called You Must Remember This. If you listen to episode 25, there's a deep dive into both Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee's deaths. So if you want like actual facts and not like hearsay, because this is Karina Longworth, who it shouldn't matter, but she is the girlfriend of Rian Johnson, who did Last Jedi and everything. But like it's her podcast. He does voices on it sometimes. And like she does her homework. Like she really researches this stuff. And it's really fascinating to like actually hear her go step by step as to how they died, but we'll get into that later. But if anyone wants to pause this now and listen to that or whatever, go for it.
Because I'm pretty sure you know more about that, having reviewed that podcast. I only know more of the life of Bruce Lee, and not so much about Brandon Lee.
Yeah, I was like, I already had listened to it before we even thought about doing this, because that episode is an old one. It's 25, and I'm pretty sure they're in the like 200 now. But
Right.
like, it like, it's one of, I re-listened to it like right after this movie. I listened to it again because I was like, what happened here? Because it's clear they put his face on it. I guess we're talking about it now. I'll get out of this quickly. But like, I can't watch the movie without thinking about the fact that he died making it.
Yep.
That's its own thing. Anyway, so the movie on its own, very atmospheric. He is still the director, Alex Proyas. It's his first movie, which I like. Good for him for still going after this, because this again, he got someone killed on his movie set. Like,
yeah,
like the star. Not, I mean, it doesn't
not
matter
a stunt
less.
double.
Yeah, this doesn't matter less when it's a stunt double, but it
doesn't matter. Yeah,
psychologically, like if you're like, oh, if you can be like the stunt team didn't work on that properly or something, you still are gonna feel it, and it's loss of human life. But like, this is like a direct thing of like, the atmosphere you had on set led to this. But like, he kept going. I feel like the only movie by him I like is I, Robot, but like, he's done many things. I like that it's got a tone that it's sticking to. It's there's definitely a vision for this, and it's executed. The only thing holding it back for me, and I don't even think this is a bad thing, it's not like, it doesn't make this a less of him, but for me, I'm like, oh, like there's no real like, and I don't mean world building so that I can be like, oh, how does this connect later? I just mean like, you're just in it, and there's no real like build up or like sense of me feel like, I don't know what Eric Draven was like before he died.
No, and that's the biggest thing, and that is one of my criticisms of this movie. That it assumes that you've read the graphic novel, and because it retells sections of it and then reinterprets and then builds another thing all together.
Yes.
So it is, because you get a better sense of who Eric Draven is in the graphic novel and the comic, and everything that happens here makes so much sense if you know that story, which is a big my big criticism of this. You need background research to have this really fulfilled, to really attach onto the character of Eric Draven. But you're right, it just drops you into the death scene, the first Devil's Night and all that kind of stuff. You're like, okay, let's go. This movie, let's go. It doesn't like, let's build this attachment up. Let's see how emotionally invested him and Shelley are together. It's just like, you're told, okay, they were gonna get married on Halloween
the next day.
Yeah.
Well, so like, I like that the movie just functions as like a straightforward revenge thing. Although I did read that like, in this movie they try to be like, specifically he gets his power from the crow, but in the comics that's not the case.
Correct. The comics is much more of a mystery. It doesn't give you anything.
I mean, I guess that's cool, but it's like, it seems like, I don't know. Like, I'm happy that this person got the movie. Like, what's his name, James O'Barr.
James O'Barr, yeah.
Yeah, that's the writer of the comic and the creator. He did it to work through issues of losing his wife to drunk driving.
Correct.
So I'm happy that it's made, but I was just like, oh, like, it doesn't, having never read the comic, like, I feel like I don't know what is like an inside thing, or if it's just like, did it need to have that crow aspect to it if there's no like he could have just started as a guy that like loses his girlfriend, and then you're like, okay, he's gonna get revenge, like an Equalizer or something like that. Not that the Equalizer ever loses his girlfriend, but like, it's like, you just know, like, okay, like, they shouldn't have messed with this guy, and now he's gonna go out for revenge. And this one, it's like, there's some kind of mythos going on, but I don't feel like it leans into it or I connect to it necessarily.
I think the difficulty in this movie, and where other movies try a little bit more successfully, even, I would argue, is the mythos of cultural significances of what the crow stands for. Because like, in each culture, the crow has a significant meaning,
Mhm.
in mythology. And what this one does is it tries to blend all that mythology together into one generic retelling of a revenge kind of thing, which I do appreciate that it doesn't attach itself to one particular culture, but it loses its cultural significance doing that. From what I mean, not attaching itself to one particular thing is that it ends up being very comedic and borderline cultural appropriation, or like culturally insensitive is a better term. And that's better seen in when you look at the Eddie Furlong sequel of The Crow, where it's heavily attached to the Day of the Dead in
Mm.
Mexican culture, and The Crow there, where it's just kind of where that one's like, okay, I see where this is coming from. This is like mythology coming to real life. The difficulty here in understanding that is that it, like I said, it blends all that mythos together in what a crow represents in each culture, and it assumes that you can kind of go, because in my kind of understanding, I don't think there's a deep American association with a crow versus other European kind of reiterations of that story. There's no origin story for the crow
Nah,
in
I don't know at
yeah.
all.
I
I
could
also
be very wrong with that because
one
it's more
thing,
of an anthropological discussion.
yeah, one thing I read, which I don't know how true it is that there were no actual crows in the movie. They were using ravens just so they could get a certain look, which I find funny
Yeah,
because they already had
I believe that's true.
because they don't give a last name in the comic book, but they gave him the last name Draven, which already
Yes.
sounds like Raven.
Yep.
And I know you wouldn't adapt this man's work and then be like, we're changing it to Raven because they look cooler, but like it's like it was right there. But like one thing also, they used the same one of the crows in quotation marks was used in every single movie, which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
They kept that continuity. Yeah, I think honestly it's like a fun, I mean, it's hard to say fun, it's a very moody, but like overall, like
I don't think it's fun. I don't think it's fun at all. It's so moody and emo. It really is.
yeah, no, but what I mean is like you like it's not really trying to make you think about it. It's very straightforward. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
these are the people who killed him, and one by one they're gonna get what they deserve.
Yes.
The only thing that I thought was weird was like that kid, and I don't know if she's in the comics, but I was like,
So, and
why?
that's one of the biggest things is the kid is in the comics, but a very small portion of it.
Because they give her so much to do, but like it's never really like because I'm thinking like, oh, okay, like this is how they humanize the crow. Like you didn't get to see him before, but like she's gonna help bring him back to being human, and like they'll work together or whatever. And then it's like, no, the movie's not really doing that.
Yeah.
Because they only have 2 or 3 scenes together, and it's always like, okay, hi, bye.
Yeah. And this
then
is
he
why I
does.
changed your friend and all that kind of stuff. And that is one of the biggest things is I'd much rather them cut out the kid or reduce its significance. Because I think the reason why they wanted to do that was to build up the mom's redemption. The scene where she cooks the eggs.
Which they kind of abandoned because I feel like later on she's like, I'm still gotta run away from her. Like it seems like she's still like, she acknowledges in that scene like, oh, you're getting better, but then like later on it still feels like she's like, yeah, but I want to be with Eric, like I gotta get away from that.
Well, I mean, if you know your friend's back from the dead and you kind of want to, like it.
Well, I don't know because you never see them together when he's alive. Like,
Yeah.
you know that she's friends with his fiance.
Yeah, and that's a bigger criticism is like the Eric and little kid, and I forget what her name is. That relationship isn't as significant as the fiance's relationship. But they did say like, oh,
I think it's Sarah.
Sarah, yeah. They did say like both of them took care of me because my mom was a deadbeat or something like that.
Yeah, but like you never see them together before, so I'm like,
yeah.
Is she like the sister of Shelley? No, she's not.
No,
that's not her aunt. It's just she just knows him. And then with Detective Albrecht, it's kind of like, okay, like maybe this is like this is the person we're gonna work with to like help navigate this thing, but they don't really commit to that either, which is why I'm saying like I guess it's just supposed to be like a fun revenge story because there's no attempt to be like, all right, let's ground that, like the same way you talked about how like in Batman 89, it's like through Vicky Vale's eyes that we start to understand Batman's world. It's like they don't have that in this. You're just
Yes.
like, and again, I'm not saying like, oh, they should have. I'm just saying like that to me means like, okay, so they wanted to have character, because I know Ernie Hudson's character is like an amalgamation. It's not like a full on character. It's like a mix of people. And then you're saying yes, Sarah is in the comic, so it's like they have them because they wanted to connect some stuff from the comics. But it's
Well,
like,
no, because the reason why is from the comic, it's a very, very straightforward retelling of here are the 4 people that did this to my fiance, and these are the 4 people I have to kill. It has nothing to build into the gangster kind of world. So my theory on why they built the gangster kind of world and why they did that, and even like in that scene where he's like, I don't want to kill anyone else. I just want him. I just want Skate. He's just like, if you didn't hurt me, then none of this would have happened. He would have no reason except for at the very end, that final showdown is just to protect Sarah. Like that's literally it. There's no real like quarrel with the main guy except for the Crow, like Eric, killing off some of the henchmen, which he has way more of, which is weird to me at the same time too. So it ends up being that I feel the reason why you have to build up the officer as well as the kid is because you have to hype up that scene and have some like aspect of significance, like he's actually saving more than just his selfish reasons. Because if it's just a selfish, like I'm going to kill 4 guys, that is less of a movie, I think, maybe from a pitch standpoint. I don't know. It's still good because like I wish they did the actual, and this is why The Crow, the movies never satisfy as much as the book does, or the graphic novels, because they never actually go into the significance of the kills and how he actually does it and the compassion that he has towards some of them. It just shows it's a straight up revenge. You can't do anything and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I don't know that you need the officer and the kid.
You don't. I don't
think it builds anything up. It's kind of like I'm happy that Ernie Hudson's in it. I like his scenes, but like I feel like you pick one or the other. Like either you got him like relating to, and my pick would be Ernie Hudson, especially just because like this isn't supposed to be like a kid friendly movie, so already you don't need that kid. You don't need kids to be like, oh, that's me on screen. Like you already are being like, this is decidedly an R-rated dark film.
Yes.
So there's no need to try and like appeal to kids in that way. And in that sense, yeah, like leaning more into the Albrecht character would make sense to me as like, if you wanted to give him more layers than just a guy that came back from the dead and is trying to get revenge. That like the moments where he's talking about what love is and like, oh, there's nothing trivial and anything, like that's good for like filling out his character. But you can like kind of space that out throughout the movie instead of having it just be in one scene that kind of slows things down. But who knows? I feel like that is the one thing that kind of made me feel like at a distance. And I feel like if I was younger, obviously it would work better for me because I'd just be like, yeah, this is what I grew up on. This hit me at the right time. But and even if I wasn't younger, if I saw it just earlier before what we have now, it would have worked better for me. But I felt kind of like at a distance with like the attempt to like do something more when they didn't need to. Like,
yeah, it's
like I think about stuff like John Wick, and it's like it works because you're like, oh yeah, he needs to get revenge, and you can build it out as much as you want because as he gets revenge, that's causing other people to be pissed off and they'll want revenge on him. So you don't need the other stuff about like, but he needs to save this kid at the end because it's like, well, like other things will happen, like. Or even if you think about Batman, when Commissioner Gordon's talking about like retaliation, it's like, or escalation rather, it's like, sure, you get like, you stop these criminals, but then they're going to just keep doing things to get bigger and better. And then you are putting other people at risk. And then you can have him feel like he needs to save those people that he's now put in danger.
Yeah, and John Wick is one of the better comparisons for what this movie should be trying to achieve. But like, I think I have no idea, this is purely speculation on my part. Back then, maybe they didn't think a purely revenge-driven story with that much gore would have been successful in the mainstream, and therefore softened it up and try to make him more human. Because in the graphic novel, it's just like, oh yeah, I used to. There's none of that. Like, I have to avoid you. It's just kind of like he straight up sees Sarah on the street, goes to her, and all this kind of stuff. Hey, I'm back, like all this kind of stuff, and there's no like, I can't see you. He's just like, I'm off to do my thing. Like, I got to kill him. All this kind of stuff. So they did build that kid character up in a very, very different way. The Ernie Hudson's character is in the comic book, but it's just that one scene where it's like Gideon at Gideon's pawn shop where he legitimately is like, "Hey, stop or I'll shoot." Like that scene's in the comic book, but then
what I read was that they took a character that's in it, but they gave him story arcs from other characters
within the book.
Yeah. So what you're relating to is like, oh yeah, I remember when that character named this did this in the comic.
Correct.
But they gave him other things to do that other cops do.
Yeah, they blended all those cops together with him. That's what they did. But like those things are there. In the comic. So like there's a lot that they made up here and reinterpreted. Which I do kind of appreciate, kind of don't at the same time. But I don't know. But you're right. The kid thing doesn't work. It doesn't work that well for me now. Rewatching this movie critically.
And sure. I wish you had any amount of time with the fiance to like appreciate her as a character and not, because I'm not a fan of the whole like, oh, here are the tortured memories of her being like, I love you, and him like, I love you too.
Yeah, that overly romanticized version of it. But I mean, like, it does fit the emo setting of this.
It does. I'm just saying what would work for me. Again, nothing I'm saying is like, oh, this movie is bad because this. It's just me giving my thoughts on like what worked and didn't work for me.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if they've been trying to remake this movie for the longest time. One of the things I would like them to do is at least build up that scene in the beginning a little bit more. Not necessarily the violence part, but like the part right beforehand, showing them getting ready for the wedding, all that kind of stuff, showing how much in love they are, and then like having the break in and then like flashback or whatever. I think that would be a little bit more significant, knowing at least you see them together beforehand, knowing that they're so happy together and all and what it meant. Versus this is just like, oh, it's crime scene right away. And I don't know if that was done for budgetary reasons or like for suspense reasons, because one of the things I do like about being dropped in right away is slowly figuring out what happened throughout that night through his flashbacks and all that kind of stuff. That is one vehicle I kind of do like, but it's one that I don't think works as well, because it works better. And I was thinking about this, knowing that the character of Eric Draven in the comic book and not the movie. That's the
right
issue.
Like, so it works if you've read the comics.
Correct. That's again one of my original criticisms,
because I think when I watch it I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it, he's dead.
Yeah.
And like, again, as I say this, I recognize that Batman 89 also does know like what was he like before he was Batman. Like you see the kid, but like everyone knows that about Batman pretty much. Like, oh yeah, his parents got shot in front of him.
Right.
So like you've already just dropped in with him being Batman. This one is only weird because it's like they don't just like jump right to him being the Crow. You still have like the day that they were killed is when it starts.
Yeah.
And then like he comes out of the grave and you're kind of like, oh, like there's no, and it's not like he has to figure out powers. It's just he learns he can heal. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll just do what I need to do because I can heal. Yep. But it's kind of like, oh, like, I don't know how you tell the story differently, but I just felt like it's weird that like I don't know what he's like before this. Like it seems like, for me anyway, it would have been like, it would have started on one of the like gangsters being killed. And then it would have been Ernie Hudson's character that's like, oh shit, like he's connected to this murder. And like, that's kind of how you build out what happened. It like, and that doesn't make my version better, but like, I just felt like, oh, if we're not concerned with like who he was, then like,
because
why?
one
But I
thought.
think you're right. It plays into the moodiness of it.
Yeah, it plays into the moodiness much more. One thing I was thinking of is that I was thinking, based on the way they were talking about Spawn and all that kind of stuff, that maybe there'd be a lot of similar comparisons, more successfully, hopefully, of what this is, in the sense where this is kind of like that kind of aspect of Spawn, where they're telling it from the police officer's perspective and all that kind of stuff. That's
No, I
what I
wouldn't
was.
want it to be from the police officer. I would
No,
want
I
that to be
wouldn't
the
want it to
entry
be.
point, because
But that's
that
how they
is
were
one thing I
talking
don't like
about.
about Spawn, what they're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah,
But
but
it
that's
would
what they
be
were
like,
talking about with the Todd McFarlane. So that's
don't
what I
like
was
that.
thinking. Like, this is something like a backbone, if you will, some sort of loose framework of what that might look like. And that's why I think, without knowing him beforehand, it doesn't work. Because in Spawn too, it's very like, well, there's the double cross and all that kind of stuff. But you get to know that character a lot more beforehand and get to know why that double cross is such a big deal of why he comes back. Here it's just like it's random, and you figure out it's through this like zoning thing or whatever.
Yeah, like I was like, oh, this isn't even like a personal thing. This was
No, it's
just, it
completely
really
not.
was just a random
Yep.
thing. Like his fiance was someone they wanted to get rid of.
Yes, he just kind of
And
got.
he just came home. Like,
The-
I guess so. It wasn't random. It was targeted, but his death was random because he
Right.
shouldn't. They didn't think he would be there. They just wanted to kill her.
Yes. Well, they wanted the signature, obviously, but then they took it way too far.
Yeah, that I didn't want to get into that part. I was like, ugh. Yeah.
That part makes me very uncomfortable. And yeah,
We're talking about rape.
Yeah.
They rape her before they kill her.
Correct. Not fun.
Yes.
It's one of the things I cannot watch on. So I like just fast forward through it.
I'm not a fan of it because I'm like, you're already like fridging the girlfriend, so to speak. Did you need to add this part too?
That's why like season 2 of Sons of Anarchy is so uncomfortable for me. I'm just like,
I don't like how it starts, but I like what comes out of it.
Yeah, I like what comes out of it, the whole story. But like that scene, I can't watch that episode. I'm just like, nope, I know what happened. Like it's just too uncomfortable. Can't do it.
But
yeah, that's why.
At least she gets to stay alive.
So I want to take a little bit of time to kind of pull some comparisons from this and the comic book, especially with the deaths that he does. Because in the comic book, there's he chases after all 4 of them: Tintin, Skank, Funboy, and T-Bird, and he kills them all in his own way. Now, one of the biggest things that's different about here, about the gangsters that he kills, is that the mom's boyfriend, I think Funboy, the morphine thing, what he does in the comic book is that he just basically very, very similar interpretation of the interrogation, I guess. To find, he goes after him first to find out where everyone is, and then he forces him to do all the morphine in front of him, as opposed to him just like straight up murdering him and all that kind of stuff. So he does have some compassion there, but he still like does it because that's a really, really important scene, I think, because visually there's something really, really cool in the comic book where he just writes something like, "I know why Jesus wept, motherfucker," on the thing, in his blood, and it's just like so incredibly dark. So I love the comic book for that reason, because it's so dark. But everyone else is very, very much the same. Like Tintin, he straight up just knifes him and all that kind of stuff, because that's what Tintin's thing was. T-Bird's thing was not the car the same way. I think James O'Barr did that because he was like the driving thing to cope with the mechanism. He made that scene bigger than what it was.
Oh, they couldn't film it. That was a budget thing.
Yeah, that was a budget thing. Yeah. But yeah, it was crazy. I can't remember the other ones. But yeah, the one of the biggest ones was Funboy's death was changed a lot. Right. And I think it was changed for a different reason here. I don't know why. Because it's weird that they would be like, okay, let's soften him up through this story of the kid and the detective, but also make him a straight up murderer in this one, when they had the opportunity of giving him the compassion aspect from the story, from the comic book. That was one thing I thought was weird.
I don't remember if I read this right, but I think they said in the comic, Funboy wasn't actually there when he gets killed, so that's probably why it's different in the comic.
Yes. Oh, right. That's
In
right.
this movie, Funboy is the one who shot him.
Yes.
Whereas in the comic, I don't think he was there. He's just using Funboy to like be like, where are they?
Correct. But because like Funboy was, I think, a lookout or something like that. I'm
Yeah.
not too sure. But yeah.
So sorry, I shouldn't say he wasn't there. He wasn't in the room.
He wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't in the room. He wasn't directly there. So that's why he gives him a little bit more compassion and all that kind of stuff. But I guess to make this what it is, because Funboy is straight up responsible. They're all responsible for the crime that they did and
Yeah.
what. So I guess that's why they did it this way. I just worked through that out loud. Sorry about that.
I mean, unfortunately, because I guess we can just transition to the death now. The actor Michael Massey, I want to say that's how you pronounce that, Massee.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Massey, who plays Funboy, didn't act for like a year after this because he legitimately shot and killed Brandon Lee.
Right.
And like, he's like, he died in 2016, and I think like one of the last things he said was like, no, I still have nightmares from that set.
Right.
And he's obviously has never watched the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a director's decision to be like, hey, let's have Funboy shoot him. And even in the circumstances that it happened was like, just, I mean, the Cole's notes, so to speak, of it is that it was such a like bare bones budget and set that the props guy went and bought his own bullets and tried to make blanks on his own.
Yeah.
And then a real bullet got switched in or something like that. This isn't in like a conspiracy way. Like it just because of how things went and everyone was working too long hours, everyone was making mistakes. This wasn't like, oh, they were trying to kill him. Like this was just a genuine accident, but like he got shot with a real bullet. And like I don't remember if you actually see it on screen, but there's obviously footage of you seeing.
Yeah, I don't think they use that cut, but the word
because when I watched it, I'm like, oh, this isn't what was described in that podcast, like in terms of the view. Yeah. So I'm assuming they didn't use that take.
So in the podcast, what was the scene?
He comes in with the groceries, and he's got a squib in the grocery bag that's supposed to go off, and so he gets shot. He goes off, but they're like, okay, like get up now, and they realize he's actually bleeding from his abdomen.
Right.
With most people being like, why would you actually shoot at him? You could just shoot off camera.
Right.
One. And two, like, yeah, like why are you actually shooting? Just why are you shooting at him? Like you could have had him in scene and like, or like just cut between the two of them. But that speaks to just being overtired and making bad decisions. And as I said, listen to You Must Remember This podcast, episode 25. Like it's way better explained, like the actual like science behind how the bullet did kill him. I'm not explaining it properly, but it's one of those things where like it's tragic. It is tragic, like they said in the trailer. It's like, wow, that could have been avoided.
Right.
That very easily could have been avoided, and it would have even like spoke to the moodiness if they did shoot it like you just see Funboy take the shot and then you just see him like fall down. There would be no need to have it all on camera in one shot.
It's true. So
especially if you know you're not using like actual blanks.
Yeah.
Like if you know like, oh, we had to like this was a DIY like project, like I wouldn't take any chances.
Right. Yeah,
but they weren't working like in the best conditions. It was like, all right, we need to get this done. But that was the interesting thing, because then I'm like, so this is the first scene that it's not the first scene they shot, obviously, but it's the first scene we see basically.
Yeah,
and he's already dead. Like, I wonder how much of this is like what they shot after, because that's the idea, is that they like put his face on things.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a list. Hold on. You could keep talking. I think okay.
Yeah, because I think you're definitely going to know more about that. I avoided learning about that kind of stuff. Just I,
So the stuff that was shot after Brandon Lee's death was Draven first enters the apartment after digging himself out of the grave.
Yep.
What they did was they used footage of him walking in the alley and then just digitally put it like as him walking into the door.
Okay.
Him falling from the window is not him. They just again digitally put his face on someone falling.
Uh-huh.
And when he puts his makeup on, that isn't him either.
That isn't him.
And then when Sarah visits the apartment, that's not him, but they also never show his face
Yeah,
intentionally.
that was one of the more obvious ones. Yeah, but the putting on makeup one, that's pretty surprising to me.
Well, they really did some groundbreaking things with his face, like mapping it on. And there's only one scene where I'm like, oh, I can tell they mapped it on because it's kind of like glitches. But like for 93, like they filmed in 93, like it's like that's really, I mean, I guess that's also the era of like Jurassic Park and stuff, but like it's still like they don't have Jurassic Park money to make this movie.
No, because the total budget for this film was 23 million.
Yeah.
That's not that level.
I think that 23 is part of their marketing because the number quoted in one of the guys, the actors said, or no, it was one of the cameramen said it was actually 18 million they had to make the movie.
Yeah, because I think a lot of that was based on the soundtrack too, like just getting licensing for a lot of the stuff because they had a lot of big names doing this thing. Is big. Because I know Slayer was involved, Nine Inch Nails,
yeah, I was gonna say
Rage Against the Machine,
The Cure.
Yeah, The Cure. Obviously, that song is like the best thing. Like that, knowing that scene is like he was already dead when they put that scene together, where he transforms and puts the makeup on. I'm like, damn, that scene's so much better now.
I think crazy. What they said was when
I should say I'm very conflicted about it. Sorry.
Oh yeah, when the mirror breaks, that's his face in the fragments, but that's because they could easily like digitally put that in.
Yes.
But other than that, the person putting on the makeup was not Brandon Lee.
Right. Oh yeah, Pantera is here. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did not dig too much into the soundtrack because it's not for me, but it definitely works for this movie. Like it's I think it's like perfect integration. Nothing feels like, oh, this is a needle drop or something. Like it just feels like it's organically a part of this.
Yep.
I also like that, like I didn't really, I know who Brandon Lee is. This is the only movie of his that I think I've seen, but like they had Tony Todd, who's Candyman, and Ernie Hudson, who was like Winston Zeddemore in The Ghost Rider. I'm like, oh, that's nice, that's cool. They got like two big 80s like black stars. Because I think the Tony Todd character isn't in the comics. I think he was made up for this movie.
He was made up. His
name Grange or something?
Yeah, Grange. He was made up for this movie. So everything involving Top Dollar.
I like that name. Top Dollar. I like the name Top Dollar.
I know they had some really cool names for everything like that. Like, so the Top Dollar biling was Micah, and that's a weird thing there that was completely made up. The incestual part of.
I like that he's like, wait, that's supposed to be your sister. I'm like, so even the movie can't get on board with it. It's like, that's supposed to be your sister. Oh,
yeah,
that was weird.
I've never understood that scene, but I'm like, okay, sure, maybe he's just like spiritually speaking, but he's like, no, he actually says like, no, my father's is like, this is my father's daughter, and I'm just like, wait, so is this a half? Because I don't know if they were trying to hint at
that he's half.
Yeah, that he's half Asian or something like that.
Because I would imagine the idea is that unless they're saying Bai Ling is half Asian.
Yeah.
Either way,
or or. No, they would be that Bai Ling would be full Asian, and then Michael Wincott would be half Asian.
It would be easier for me to believe that Bai Ling is half Asian.
Why would that be the case?
There's nothing about Top Dollar that looks Asian.
No, nothing about them looks related whatsoever. Which is why.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, so it would mean like they have the same white dad, different mothers.
I would say that they have the same Asian dad, different mothers.
No, I know. I understand that's what you're saying, but what I'm saying is it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's not. Neither way does that scene make sense, which makes me be like, why did they put that in? It's weird. It is whatever. But I don't know. It maybe they try to like, and this is where I don't appreciate it too much using Bailing to be like, oh, bringing in mysticism, like Asian mysticism kind of thing.
Because she's the one that figures out the crow
Yes.
is his power source.
Correct.
And it's like, I bet Ben has thoughts about that.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate that too much. Especially like everything that she kind of does in the movie. It's like, oh, she's like the
sorceress.
The sorceress kind of thing. Like, oh god, the plaything, like after that threesome that they have, where they cut out that woman's eye and murder her and all that kind of stuff. And
I was so confused as to who that woman was supposed to be. I was like, wait, is that? Did
I
they
think
dig up his wife? And I'm like, no. What is this? What's going on?
Like someone that
just someone else, yeah.
From downstairs, and it's like, oh, these are how corrupted these people are, or how ruthless they are. I think that was the point they were trying to make with that, or just the idea of like when they're having that meeting, and then she goes like, I like the pretty lights, and the whole like thing just laughs at her, and she's visually like not impressed by it. So I just like don't love that.
I also laughed at I like the pretty lights, not because of how she said, but I was just like. So this even this like it just seemed like this movie wanted to reject her. Like if this was like improv, they were like they were never yes-anding any of her stuff.
Yeah,
like she says that, and people are like already like laughing her, trying to laugh her out the room, or like
exactly.
This is my sister, and they're like, what? She's supposed to be. I'm like, what is going on with this?
Yeah,
like
they kind of shit all over her character in this, and it's just like the other thing too is like her makeup is horrible.
Yeah, I'm not in it. I'm not into it.
Awful. They did not know what they were doing, or they were going for a very, very crazy. I don't know what they were doing because I don't remember that being a '90s look. But
no, like I mean, I read it as they were trying to make her look like she was like a sorceress. Like,
yes,
there was no attempt to be like, oh, she blends in here. Like, I feel like the whole point was she stands out even in this world.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, what's that mystic thing that they're doing? Oh, it's cocaine. They're just doing a big pile of cocaine. It's got nothing to be like herbs or anything. That's I didn't like that. I really like watching that again. I'm like, oh god, I don't like that.
Yeah, I think I don't know how much. I think the only time I will actually fault the movie is because it's not really interested in like fleshing out the otherworldly stuff. No, like it's there. They pay lip service to it. The fact that like his big showdown with Top Dollar is them like sword fighting on top of a roof, I'm like, what? Like,
yeah,
isn't this guy supposed to be like a gangster? Like he's not. And I don't mean like, oh, he should be holding his gun sideways, but like one thing I thought was that he's supposed to be like the top of whatever this is. And why would he ever like, unless this was like really leaning into like, he also wants the crow's power, and then I can at least buy into like he would lower himself to trying to fight this guy. I'm like, it seems like the way this movie plays out, he should have just been like, I'll throw my lackeys at him.
Yeah,
like, he shouldn't be like a formidable opponent, and he certainly shouldn't be like sword fighting this guy on a rooftop.
That's one of the reasons why like the ending of the like that final showdown makes very little sense. Aside from the fact is like, oh, I'm trying to save Sarah. It makes very little sense.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, like it's weird because I know in the comics Top Dollar isn't the top of the line. He's actually a part of someone else's thing.
Yeah,
but this movie didn't lead me to believe he had a boss. Like I was led to believe like there may be other bosses, but he doesn't work for those bosses. He's trying to like bring people together, or at least
like
get
one
them
of
to
those
work for
things
him.
where it's like a district meeting. Like,
yes.
Oh, you like it seemed like that where they're gathering for Devil's Night, and that meeting it seemed like, oh, you represent the Asian gangsters and you represent this. It had that kind of feel to it, but it seemed like he was in charge of his own people, which were the Tintin T-Bird gang and all that kind of stuff, and assumed to have more of that. But you're right. That's one thing about Top Dollar is like, why is he fighting his own fight? It doesn't make it seem like he's interested in doing that, aside from stealing the crow's power. But they don't actually lean into that because he's just like, well, die. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, they just want to get rid of him, and I'm like, why wouldn't you send people to get rid of him then? Like, why would you get in? Because I don't. Maybe I should rewatch it. But like, I don't remember there being an element of like, and then we can steal his power. They were just
There's
like,
no element.
No, the crow is the power. Just kill the crow, then you can kill him.
Yeah, and like the only one that's interested in kind of like grabbing the crow, like, because what's his face? Grange just like, oh, I'm gonna snipe the crow down. And then Byling's
So,
like, I'm gonna steal the crow now.
yeah.
But I don't think Byling's intention was to kill the crow. I think Byling wanted to, or Micah wanted to do something with it or something like that. Maybe extract the crow's powers that way, or take the
Yeah,
crow's
maybe.
eyes, maybe. But there was never any discussion of, hey, let's do this. If we can trap him here, we can take his power, and I'll be the most powerful gangster or something like that.
Yeah, that's why
Nothing like
that was my initial thing of fun, because I'm like, if I'm just looking at this like a fun revenge thing, then I can be like, yeah, whatever. Like,
Yep.
he annoyed this group of people and now they want to kill him. Like,
Yep.
instead of being like, no, but what does it mean? What are they trying to do when they grab the crow? I don't think the movie does itself any favors by inviting that kind of thought, because like it really should just be like, no, this is a straight down the middle revenge story.
Correct. Like at that point, I would have appreciated more if Top Dollar was like, "Hey, you killed my strongest guys. I'm gonna take you out."
Yeah.
Like but it's just kind of like,
and it should be more of a torture thing and less of an actual like fist fight, or, as I said, sword fight. Like, it should be that like he gets the upper hand somehow, and like the crow is tied up. Like, I just like, why would they ever be? And it's not like they're saying he's super like strong because of his powers. He just can't. He basically can't die unless, I mean, as long as the crow's doing well, he can't die.
Yeah.
So like, I'm also not trying to say he's not like a physical match for him, but I'm just like, it does seem weird that like he gets lowered to this level, because like there's not enough time in the movie to feel like, oh, the crow's really built up a name for himself and people are like afraid of him like they are Batman. Mm-hmm. They're just like, oh, this guy's like killing our guys. Let's get rid of this idiot.
Correct. That's it.
No, whatever.
Like the other reason why I was thinking about this too was Top Dollar could be like, hey, you ruined Devil's Night. I wanted Devil's Night to be big.
It did seem like he cared about Devil's Night.
Yeah.
Because he was like, this is going to be a good one or something like that. Like, let's start.
Well, he basically intended it to be the last one. He wanted to burn down Detroit, right? Because he was and I love the fact that they fit that in with the movie. The whole idea of like, the rebellion became the institution. Very Nirvana-esque and rebellious aspect of it. So I like the fact that they fit that in, but the idea of like, oh, I wanted to burn down Detroit, for what reason though? It seems to me that if you're a crime boss, you wouldn't want to tear down what's making you money. You would want to keep it going, right? Like the way Gotham, like I don't think any of the Gotham gangsters would ever say like, I want to burn Gotham down, except for
he went to like Ra's al Ghul level of like, let's burn it down to show.
Correct.
That's a show of power, but like Ra's al Ghul also doesn't like look to gain anything financially from that. Right. It is just a straight up like, no, I want to show you what I can do.
Correct.
Him burning, it's like, I feel like that was more like, he's the bad guy. He just wants bad things to happen, instead of thinking like, but he is someone who like financially benefits from things being the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for his character to be like, no, I want to tear it all down. I want there to be no more like Devil's Night keychains or whatever it is he says. If that's his thing about it, it just makes less and less sense, because it's just like, okay, well, why would these other crime bosses do this too? Because the idea of Devil's Night being related to arson, that could have been like tied in together. Okay, we're using this as a ploy to hit our enemies and all that kind of stuff. But then you're having a union of your enemies together, arguably in one place, and it just makes very little sense. So so like that last part of the movie does fall apart. It really does. But like, I don't love the movie for that. I love the movie for like the feel.
It's a feel, yeah. It's an emotional thing. Yeah. That's why I don't get when people are like, oh, you can't bring sentimentality into why you like movies. Like,
no,
I don't understand that criticism. Like, that can't be true. Like, a lot of why people like movies is how they make them feel.
Yeah,
like that is the success or lack of success of a movie. Is like it can't possibly just be like, they lit this scene well. That was a good place to cut the scene. Like, they are certainly saying the words properly. Like, it is all of those things that also like get culminated in how it makes you feel.
100%. It's very, I mean, if anything, that's what movies are intended to do. So I hate when people are like, no, you can't say that. I'm like, well, art is supposed to invoke feeling. So if this if whatever piece of art invokes feeling in you and you like that feeling, then who is someone else to say that no, that's not a valid reason for liking someone or liking something? I think it's one of the best valid reasons why
Yeah.
a discussion immediately should halt. It's like, oh, this invoke like of why like, oh, if we're critiquing stuff, or not halt, but like be like, okay, that makes perfect sense to me, as opposed to being like, no, I need you to justify this. I'm like, no, what someone else is saying is basically, I need you to find a reason that makes me happy for why you like this, because I
Yeah.
don't. And I'm like, that's not a fun way to have any discussion in my mind.
No, I think it's what's made clear because it did not work for me, but
Yeah. Because
I
this movie does fall apart. I can't be
but
like,
like I get that
that's a
like
great
this
movie.
would work for people. Like this is and I'm not like I'm looking down on people when I say that. I'm saying like there is like a feel to it, and like that's what I said up top. Like one thing you can say about it is there was a clear vision for this,
Yes.
and
And
I feel like they executed it.
I think what they did a lot of, because you can see, I think this is one of the movies that does there's a lot of inconsistencies with how they frame this movie and the shots and all that kind of stuff, because some of them are like, oh, you're clearly going for the comic book angle there, and then some they just kind of completely go off and do their own thing. So it does feel like a mishmash of movies smashed
I
into one.
didn't feel that way at all.
Really?
I felt like it was a very consistent, cohesive movie. It's just not one that that's the thing. When you get so specific about what you're trying to accomplish, then it means that the people who like what you're doing will really like it. And then, mileage may vary for other people. But
I think we just understood the whole DCEU and the love for the Snyder Cut. I think we just understood it.
I didn't want to bring that up because this is coming out so much longer after that. I didn't want to bring that up at all.
Congratulations to that fan base. But it's just a joke. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely does invoke that feeling in me. It launched for me a lot of my musical origin tastes and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It was a huge part of my aesthetic. I was even the Crow for Halloween a couple times.
Nice.
But yeah,
I figured that would be the case.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's one of the best. Like, and I love. There's an episode of South Park where the devil's throwing a Halloween party, and Satan's throwing a Halloween party, and he's like, no one else can be the Crow because anyone else is the Crow just wants to be the Crow because it's hot and they want to hook up. And I'm like, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard, because there's some accuracy to that. I'm not gonna lie, it was funny. But yeah, no, that turned into a 3-year relationship.
Interesting.
Cool. Yeah. So this movie definitely it has that personal connection for me. But when I objectively look at it and dissect it critically, it loses a lot of grit. So when it comes down to rating it, it's not going to be as high as a lot of people think.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be low. It's just not going to be as high as how much I love this movie.
I would give this a 6.
Yeah, this is a 7 for me. It's
That's
not
fair.
the way I talk about this movie. A lot of people think it'd be a 9. I'm like, no, there's objectively a lot of things wrong with this movie. Like the kid, just like make the kid more significant. Like make that backstory more significant. Make the final showdown make sense a little bit more. If you're gonna lean into the mystical thing, just do it and don't apologize for it, as opposed to like tippy-toeing around it.
Yeah, that might speak to like the time. Like they wanted to make comic book movies, but they didn't want to like actually deal with the comic book aspects of it. But like I would say you're right. Like I thought there was going to be more leaning into the lore of it. Like again, they say it at the beginning. Like Sarah's voiceover says like what the general conceit is, which is this crow came back to bring, or it didn't come back. It brought Eric back to like right some wrongs.
Yeah.
And I guess that's just where they leave it, even though they've got this villain, Top Dollar, who also seems like, by way of Micah, like is into some stuff, which never fully gets, or at least I thought like that's where we would be going, is to like dig into something.
Because that's why I would. I would like a remake of it to address that. Like, have Bai Ling's character, if she is a source, like if I was to remake this, I'd be like, okay, I know it's an Asian stereotype, but okay, just do it. And don't make her aesthetic so stereotypical, especially because of the fact that it was the 90s grunge era. Like, do that at least. So she's like, oh, I've heard about this in my culture. And then make it so that the final showdown makes sense between Top Dollar and the Crow, where he's like, no, I want to steal your power. And he's misled to believe that he doesn't fully understand that the Crow brought him back from death to right a wrong. He's like, no, I can, now that it's real, I can steal it. I want that kind of thing a little bit better to build this movie out, because this movie is, for the past 5 years, has been in pre-production.
They had Bradley Cooper, Jason Momoa.
Momoa was attached to it, and I
remember you didn't like Jason Momoa, but having watched this movie, I'm like, I get the Jason Momoa move. Yeah,
he would be perfect for this. I 100% agree with that. And I think, like, with Momoa, because of his size, they would make this more of an action movie, and definitely, like, lean into the fight scenes more, which is common, I think, in the 90s era action films and all that kind of stuff that we're seeing. Well, not Die Hard kind of things, that the fight scenes are just not, well, I mean, what am I saying? There's no fight scene in Die Hard aside from gun showdowns. But like the fight scenes are not as choreographed and big as they are now. So it's a very interesting thing.
They could, yeah. I mean, it's this is just like a complete, like, as our label mate Black Hole Films would say, this was just a black hole film for me, where it's like I never saw it, and like I feel like it means so much to certain people, like it's like you, obviously,
yeah.
And like, just when I see like other celebrities who like it, and I'm just basically really hanging on to the Roger Ebert quote, because I'm like, like, because I was expecting to have to like go into IMDb and be like, oh, this got like a 5 or something, just because of when it came out, and I feel like people are like, oh, those movies weren't good, but like, it's got a very strong, like,
yeah, IMDb has it at 7.6 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes has it at 18%.
But the like actual Metascore based on like actual critics is still 71.
Right. Because they're looking at it the way we're looking at it, versus like these high scores from IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, it's like based on emotional feel. Like, if I was basing
as we said, for Rotten Tomatoes, it's never good to mix that into it, because as we said, that's not saying that the average score was what you said. That's just saying 80% of the people who rated it liked it.
Correct.
And I don't remember what the threshold is. It could be 65, it could be 67. All that means is 80% people rated it over that.
Yeah, that's you could have had. How I see it as approval rating.
Yeah, but like it's not the same thing. That's why I don't like to bring in the like Rotten Tomatoes score.
Fair enough.
That's not judging like where people ranked it, because again, there are things that have 100% on Rotten Tomato. Doesn't mean people think it's a perfect movie. It just means no one has rated it below that 67 or whatever number it is.
Right. Everyone gave it at least, let's say, a C+.
Yes.
Like, that's like, okay, yeah, everyone gave it a stamp of approval.
Yeah. And that's all that. That's what that means. And it doesn't mean it's not a valid way of seeing if something's good. It just, I feel like people really misunderstand what's going on there.
Oh yeah, they definitely overinflate that value for sure. They were like, oh, it's got a Rotten Tomato. I'm like, that doesn't mean what you think it means. It just means that 80% of the people that liked it, watched this movie, liked it. Enough to give it a positive rating, a C- at the most. Like I said, I keep using the C thing as an example, but like that, it was like, oh, okay, cool. So I mean, it's still got relevancy from the perspective of like, oh, the majority of people like this movie, so it's worth checking out. If you didn't have any connection to it whatsoever, it's like, hey, The Crow, especially if you're on quarantine mode or something like that.
Yeah, like it's accessible. It's not like you'll be like, I don't know what's going on here, and I think. I was kind of hoping that I might get lost, but I'm like, no, it's a very straightforward thing. Like, he got killed. He wants to avenge his wife's death.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that, because I know you like revenge movies, that was one of the reasons why I was really excited for you to watch this. But yeah.
I just feel like I got cheated out of the moment where you're like, oh, like, okay, cool. Like, yes, they retroactively show the rape and everything, but by that point, I'm like, yeah, they're already dead. Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm losing anything. I never really knew them to
Yeah.
begin with.
It's a movie that suffers from a lot of issues with storytelling, but now with the evolution of storytelling and movie making and all that kind of stuff, I think it's gonna be the remake is gonna be really really cool. But I do still expect it to be a mid-range budget. I don't think they're gonna pump this into thinking it's gonna be a blockbuster.
No.
I think the interesting thing about this film though is that it spawned off 4 sequels. That was
Mhm.
crazy to me.
Well, I mean, that speaks to people liking it, right?
Mhm.
I mean, they obviously, I don't, I don't know how many of them went to theaters, but like,
Yeah. So
they knew there was a market to like that people would pay to see more.
yeah. So the sequel was like there's the City of Angels is 1996. Uh, there's that one. The premise of that is criminals killed his son Danny, and he returns to avenge his son and all that kind of stuff. There was a TV show in '98 called Stairway to Heaven that didn't pan out really really well, but it was Canadian led. Third was um, Crow Salvation, which had Kirsten Dunst in it, which was really really funny.
I must say the Yellow Ranger is in the Crow City of Angels.
Yes,
Tai Trang.
yeah, she's in there too.
We're
And then the
watching these
fourth
for
and
that.
last one in 2000. No, not that true. The fourth one, Crow Wicked Prayer, was done with Eddie Furlong, and that one is really bad.
It's got Tara Reid in it, so
It had Tara Reid in it.
there's that.
And Tito Ortiz. There's that, and Emmanuel Shakiri, and Danny Trejo. So the cast is good. The movie is not.
Damon John. Wow, the guy who
sorry?
made Fubu. Damon
Yeah.
John.
Yeah.
Shark Tank. He's
Yeah.
in it as Proudfoot Joe.
Yeah, I think the Wicked Prayer. That's the one where they lean into the Mexican aspect.
I would assume yes, based on the people in this movie.
Yeah, as well
I'm
as
assuming they tried to make Emmanuel Shakiri come off as Latinx.
yes, they
I'm
did.
assuming that's what they tried to do.
She's Jimmy's girlfriend, and
She's
Jimmy
what now?
is Jimmy Cuervo.
Sorry, is it a different Crow every time or the same
It's
one
a
every time?
it's a different Crow. Well, it's the same mythos. It's the same premise that the Crow brings.
What I
Someone
mean
back.
is it Eric every time?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a different Crow every time. So in the Eddie Furlong one, he's Jimmy Cuervo is the guy. So his family Cuervo is Spanish name for Crow. So they really didn't lean too much into that. David Boreanaz is in this too. I forgot to
Yes,
mention that.
he is listed way before Eddie Furlong. No, he's not. Just
No,
before.
he's not.
He is listed before Eddie Furlong, though, so it's weird.
Yeah, I think this was supposed to be one of those attempts for Eddie Furlong to come back, but it never really panned out for him. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, the sequels are not good. But I'm surprised that they got them. I don't know if Crow Salvation was released directly to theaters. I mean, directly to video, and the Eddie Furlong one was released in theater for 1 week before going to video.
Okay, and City of Angels was released in theaters.
Yep.
Interesting. I've been off mic for quite some time. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
All right. Well, that's The Crow.
Yep, that is The Crow.
I gave it a 6. You gave it a 7.
Yes, sir.
It is a
Go watch it if you like 90s alt grunge.
Also, I would say just get all of the stuff out before trying to watch it. I found it very distracting to try and watch it and be like, so what part like was he alive for? What like I would say try like do all your research about that so you can get that out of your system and just try to enjoy the movie as like as it was. I mean, it never had a chance. He died before it came out, but like just when they decided they wanted to make it, try and enjoy it in that way of just, hey, here's a movie that about a guy that comes back for revenge.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Simple, straightforward, fun to understand, and all about the feels. So, good times.
All right. Having said that, guys, please, we would love for you to hit up thatshelf.com, because as we said at the beginning, we are part of That Shelf podcast network. We are part of a great family of podcasts like Bad Gay Films, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, No Budget Nightmares. What a great theme song. And other ones. So please go there, find out some podcasts that you like, listen to our podcast. Go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten if you want to hear more episodes by us that you don't see on That Shelf. And if you want to get in touch with us, we are at TDF Spoiled on Twitter, spoiledpodcast@gmail.com on email. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're there. And if we're not, why don't you get in touch with us and tell us where we should be on that thing. Rate, review, and subscribe on all of those podcatchers and share with your friends, please. Thank you. Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Stay safe and wait till the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.